Greetings, my friends. Hope you are doing well. Dr.Sami here, board certified radiologist. I want to welcome you to this video, 10 steps to take right now to get into the teleradiology game, big box company route. So this is kind of an elemental basic video that I've created for those radiologists who are thinking about going into teleradiology, not sure what to do, kind of maybe you're a new grad, a new residency grad, or new fellowship grad, or maybe you've been in a practice for a few years and you're thinking, okay, I want to start to explore this. So some elemental tips, kind of some things that you should do in order, some pitfalls to be aware of, right? Warnings, right? And just some kind of pitfalls that and problems I've experienced on the way, and maybe share some pearls of wisdom with you as well. So let's get started with this here, right? So let's get going with that, and let's dive right into it. Okay, so first thing, so the first thing to consider is, what is this mysterious world of teleradiology? Like, what is teleradiology, right? I talk to radiologists, hospital-based, whatnot, and still a bit of a mystery. It's not exactly entirely clear how the whole thing works. And if you've actually never worked from home full-time, there's a lot of considerations, a lot of questions, a lot of concerns and whatnot, because it kind of seems like this mysterious world of work-life balance, and a lot of the big box companies, have painted like this really happy picture of people laying on the beach, doing teleradiology reads, having all kinds of time, and that is true for a good portion, but there's some challenges and some nuances to that, right? Because it's kind of a romanticized view of teleradiology from the beach, and you can see it on the advertisements from a lot of or at least one of the big box companies literally has a family on the beach, in the water, and the whole deal is like, it's just, roses and peaches. But I mean, I think the bottom line, though, it is a privilege and an honor to serve patients while having time for family and developing yourself as a physician. Physician burnout is a big thing these days. People kind of are on this. You go through medical school, you're really excited, and I was like this, going through this evolution, and you're just happy to be in a job, actually, once you've done your training and whatnot, and you're starting to make some money, right? And the dollars are coming in, but then you get a bigger house, a bigger car, a spouse, kids, and whatnot. And then you start to think of, okay, this is kind of like a little bit of burnout coming on here. There's this fire that's kind of being lit, and you're sitting on top of this, and you're like, all right, there has to be more balance, right? There's a lot of work, but there has to be some balance. You need something more other than that. So I want to just kind of dissect for you guys kind of some of the things, some pitfalls and things to consider and look out for as we explore this topic. All right, so let's go here. And all right, so what we're going to do in this video, short video series, is we're going to go over 10 initial steps you can take right now to get started in teleradiology, right? Keep in mind your unique circumstances. I mean, are you at the beginning of your career? Are you mid-career? Are you at the tail end of your career? There's a lot of nuances, a lot of different ways you can go about this, but stages of career and where you want to fit into the teleradiology world are very important. Are you just out of residency, out of fellowship, which, by the way, I would highly recommend anybody considering finishing residency to really consider doing a fellowship. I can't tell you how many times I've been told that, because of your MSK fellowship, which, by the way, happens to be a really popular and in-demand fellowship for teleradiology practices and practices in general out there. Can't tell you how many times I've just been told that, hey, this is awesome. We have a lot of MSK reads and whatnot. And I read everything else. I read neuro and I do mammography and whatnot, but more about that later. But fellowship is really important, in my opinion. Now, there's radiologists that have gone right out of residency into practice and start earning the money, and that's fine. I thought about that also, but I did the extra year, bit the bullet, and I think it's paid off in droves. Okay, so if you're residency fellowship, are you mid-career? Have you been attending? Have you been working in your practice for 5, 10, 15 years? Are you looking for a change of some kind? What's the next thing? Like, are you really burnt out of being in the practice you're in, whether it's a hospital practice or group politics, hospital politics, all that stuff comes into play. Are you kind of nearing retirement? Are you looking at teleradiology as a way to, retire? Pros and cons here. There is a way to work part-time and not necessarily grind it out, but consider that especially if you're going to go the big box route, these companies are going to make an investment into you and are going to see a return on that investment in terms of their investment is licensing, credentialing, technology, training, all that kind of stuff. So there are options here, though. Definitely we'll talk about that briefly in this video and then as well as in other videos here. So let's see here. Okay, so let's just get right into it, right? So step one, let's say that we're going to focus. Let's ask, what are your career goals? What are your goals? Everyone's goals are different. Different types of teleradiology practice. It bears importance to really understand the different types. If you're just coming out, big box company is the way to go. And what I mean by big box company is, they're advertising all over the place. They're the big name companies and whatnot. There's, oh gosh, probably a dozen or more, like big ones, and then maybe probably a total of 25 to 40 out there. I lose track, but I worked for a couple of big box companies for years, and it was a great intro to kind of get into the field and really get my feet wet and so on. Another option is working as an employee for a practice, right? For a practice or a hospital. This is also a newly developing option. Wasn't an option when I was starting out, but there's a lot of practices that are just going out and hiring into the market. Again, pros and cons about this. Employed, I'm not a huge fan of W-2 employees, employed position in radiology or teleradiology. I'm more of an independent kind of guy. I like the 1099 pay-per-click or pay-per-click plus hourly base. But there's a lot of permutations and iterations of things that are out there. Independent teleradiology, that'll be a whole separate video altogether. This is where I live. My practice is an independent teleradiology practice. I don't work for a big box company. I basically can determine the schedule I want, how much volume of reads I want, when I want to do them, and so forth. And I do this because I have multiple clients that I read for at the same time. Now, but that's going to get beyond the scope of this video, but just in a little nutshell to kind of throw it out there. The way I'm able to do this is I have multiple scribes that work for me in the same room at the same time, each with a different client on their computers. So, and then I read from 6 55-inch screens with a scribe in the same room sharing a screen with me. So as I read from one screen to the next, by the time I get to screen 6, all my reports are being populated by my scribe. So more about that later in a separate video. But for now, that's another model of practice, I would say, for advanced. If you've been out there in the field a while and you really know what you're doing and you're quick and you're fast, then this is something to consider. So explore what's out there, do your research, talk to all the companies, get a really good sense of their culture and all that kind of stuff. If you're just graduating out, here's another pearl of advice for me. If you're just graduating from residency or fellowship, consider getting 1 to 3 years of hospital experience. It sounds counterintuitive, but you really want to do this, and I feel this was really important for me. I worked for a few years in a hospital practice because you want to consider, the relationships between radiologists, different referring physicians, ER, administration. You want to kind of understand all those dynamics of, what's going on, who are the different players, what's the relationship, how do they tie to each other, and I think it's a great way to really get a good education beyond your residency. You could do this as a locum. I get that question sometimes. Can I be a locum? So I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I think if you're either an employee or part of a group, it's a great way to really kind of solidify what you learned in residency and fellowship. So, just my 2 cents there on that. So, okay, so step two. Let's just kind of dive into it here. So, what we want to consider is, what's your level of experience? Is this your first foray into teleradiology? If you're just getting started, let's assume you've had the couple of years experience, right? You've done the hospital thing for a couple of years. My suggestion: go the big box route. Um, it's really an education. Again, you're going to be investing a lot, no different from when you were starting out as a resident in the fellowship and then into your early practice. There's a lot to learn, right? So go the big box route for at least the beginning, at least a year, and learn everything there is. There's a couple of caveats that come with big box radiology. You have to be ready to work half all the holidays. This is kind of almost standard. It may be changing a little bit. You might be able to get away with, this, that, or the other thing. But in general, half the holidays, half the weekends, generally a 7 on, 7 off schedule. There's not going to be much flexibility around this. They're going to want something on, something off. And at some point, I did 10 on and 4 off, and that worked for a while, but it was pretty tiring. But it's going to be some kind of regularized schedule that's going to work, opposite somebody else, and so forth. It just has to work in a structure. There's going to be little flexibility, so prepare for that. Once you have a set schedule, I mean, taking weeks off, it can happen. It just depends. I think the situation is maybe different now. I haven't practiced in a big box company since 2015, so everything may have changed now. But typically, the work is evening shift work. This is the shift I work, 5 p.m. to 2 a.m., or graveyardist shifts. There's some people that like this 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I couldn't go that long. I tend to peter out at about 3 a.m. That was kind of my limit right there, was 3 a.m. I could work until 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and then crash and then wake up and kind of still have the sense that I had a bit of a normal day. So now let's talk about some pros. So one of the pros is great onboarding, training, and support. They're going to take care of your licensing, credentialing, walk you all through that. Typically, their licensing credentialing staff is really good. More about that a little later. But they're going to walk you through the process, take care of you, and so forth. Those are the pros. The cons: restrictive schedule, reduced pay per clip. You're going to be working pretty hard. You're going to be making not that much per case. It's just a reality. But that's kind of the reality in teleradiology. You're probably going to make less money per case than if you compared it to on-site practice. It doesn't make you're going to make less money overall because, keep in mind you're not commuting anywhere. You're not getting interrupted. You're just having uninterrupted reading time in general, right? But per click, you're probably going to be making a little bit less. The other thing to think about: significant non-compete provisions. More about this later, but a lot of that is kind of baked into the contract, can be negotiated. I've negotiated non-competes out of every contract because I'm independent. But if you're just starting out and you're going into one practice, we're going to share another slide what's a fair non-compete and what's not a fair non-compete. So more about that later. All right, so let's go to the next slide here. All right. So working with a big box teleradiology company. So what are we going to do? Few things. Getting your CV together. So get your CV presentable. Don't just do it on a Word document. Don't have kind of an unorganized CV with poor verbiage. Get a CV writer, hire somebody to do this for you. It's worth spending 50, 100, 200 bucks to get your CV really written professionally, organized. There's a lot of templates out there that can really kind of make it look nice, neat, and clean and organize, maybe a picture, not necessarily, but I mean, I have it in my CV. Maybe some bullets, some boxes. There's a lot of new templates that are out there for medical CVs. So get your CV together, polish it up, make sure it's updated, that sort of thing. All right. Second thing, how many state medical licenses do you have? If you just have one license, it's going to be a bit of a long haul because it's going to take 3, 6, 9 months to get multiple state medical licenses. The name of the game is you have to have multiple state medical licenses to really cast a wide net, to really get the little fishies to come in, right? Because a lot of these teleradiology companies have hospitals, imaging centers, and whatnot in multiple states. So the more state licenses you have, the wider the net is. If you have 2 licenses, there's not much net really there for you to catch much fish. So that's a reality of teleradiology, is multiple state medical licenses. I think I have 38 at last count. I forget, but it's going to get up there. Just be prepared for that. Typically, some of the big boxers can get you started with 7, 8, 9, 10 licenses, something like that. I think it's changed now. They've gotten more efficient with credentialing people in pools and whatnot, but you'll have to talk to the company and see what that is. If you're independent, you're probably going to wind up doing a lot more state medical licenses because it gives you a lot more flexibility working with clients, imaging centers, and directly for hospitals. Get ready for contract negotiations. So don't just sign the first contract that comes your way. That's not a good way to do it. You need to really study the contract, get a feel for it, understand what they're really trying to communicate, because a lot of the company culture can be gleaned through how are they on the contract. And some companies have restrictive, onerous contracts, but their culture is nothing like that. So it's kind of a hit or miss a little bit. But if the contract is, reams and reams and reams of pages long, and there's a lot of legalese, and the compensation structure is convoluted, and you don't know what you're getting, it's not clear, ask questions, get to understand it. It really should be clear. Hopefully. I mean, the big box companies like to kind of mask how they're paying their teleradiologists with convoluted formulas and all that. This happens in hospital employed positions as well. It preferably be like, a 1-to-1 relationship. This is what you get. This is what you read for a CT. You get, X amount of dollars, right? An ultrasound is this much, right? So hopefully it's broken down in terms that you can understand, but basically negotiations are part of the deal. If you have a company that says, take it or leave it, think twice about signing up with them, because in today's market, there's really a lot of room for negotiation. For sure, get an attorney involved and have that reviewed by an attorney, right? So, okay, so let's do that. And all right, so step 4, like we said before, don't just sign up with the first company. Reach out to multiple companies. Get to know them, get to know their staff, talk to the CEO. If they don't have time for you, typically they may not be as caring as you would want them to be. A lot of the CEOs will make time to talk to new radiologists. So reach out to multiple companies, get a feel for schedules, compensation, contracts, non-compete provisions, and so forth. Do not just sign up with the first company, no matter how sweet the offer and the deal is. Talk to the other radiologists at the company you're at. You can find them on LinkedIn. Just call them up and say, hey, you work for this company, what's your experience like? Are you happy? Are you a happy camper? Are there things that I should be aware of? Are you sad? Are you angry, upset? What's going on over there? Get a feel for it. Talk to multiple rads. rads like are human beings, and like any human being, there's some that are disgruntled and happy and upset, by nature, and there's others that can kind of take anything as it comes and deal with it. So get a feel for that. So now companies have changing needs and incentives are constantly changing. I was at RSNA, and one of the recruiters came up to me and said, well, we have increased our radiologist compensation by 6%. And I looked at him, I'm like, oh, well, what is that? 6% of what they were being paid before, or 6% of the overall collections, or what is that? And 6% doesn't get me out of bed uh, easily. It's 6% is not that exciting. So look at the incentives, what they have. Are they offering signing bonuses, whatnot? At the end of the day, it's really going to be an eat what you kill kind of deal. But survey the companies out there and get a feel for their company culture, and if you're really are a fit's really important. Different companies have different cultures, values, that sort of thing. Get to know the people and whatnot before you sign. Get all the contracts, compare the rates. So assuming you talk to multiple companies, I'd probably at least talk to 5. I mean, there's about 25 out there, but at least talk to 5. You don't want to spend all your time doing this, but at least talk to 5, get a feel for them, maybe more. Just depends on personal preference, but put the contracts side by side, compare the rates, the terms, how flexible they are, and non-compete provisions. This is important, non-compete provisions. And I'll tell you what I think is fair and what's not fair. Of course, spend the money, get a qualified attorney to review your contracts. It's money well worth spent. All right. Here's a little pearl. Companies strike out provisions in contracts all the time. So don't be afraid to ask. If you don't ask, you're never going to know. I mean, the worst they're going to say is no. But too many radiologists just kind of sign whatever's put in front of them. And it's just not a good way to go. So my advice would be ask, right? Ask other radiologists what they've done and what they got out. So, okay. So as we go through this, state licensure is going to be part of the deal here. It's you're going to be getting multiple state licensures and credentialing at multiple hospitals. So get ready for questions, intrusive questions into your life. They ask lots of questions. Where'd you live? Malpractice cases and all that kind of stuff. Background, and you got to have a clean record. So drug convictions and any felonies, obviously that sort of thing. That's going to be a barrier to entry. Hospital radiologists who've been at one hospital their entire life and one state medical license and nothing else are sometimes kind of surprised by this and not ready for the overwhelming inquiries into their background and whatnot. But this is just a reality. And standards have changed. I mean, if you got credentialed 10, 15 years ago, it may be different now. So keep that in mind. If you're just starting out, it's good to have a big box company do all the initial licensing and credentialing. If you only have one state medical license, I mean, let them do the work, right? Let them get you licensed in multiple states and whatnot. And you get an education on all that stuff. It's not hard. It's not rocket science, but let them do that for you. It's just part of the deal. They'll take care of paperwork, guide you through the process, get you credentialed, do all that stuff. And you'll get a feel for all the different questions and whatnot. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Now, most licensing and credentialing staff at these companies are very nice people, and they're just a pleasure to get along with. It's important. Be nice to these people. Be nice to them, and they will take care of you. Now, people come and go and switch companies or become higher ups at other teleradiology companies all the time. I've come across a few, I guess several radiologists who were just jerks to staff, and the feedback went up and down the food chain and caused that radiologist, a couple of radiologists I know, to miss out on opportunity. I know a radiologist pretty well, and he wants to work for us and one of our clients, and I shared with the client the name of the radiologist and who they are, and they're just like, we don't want to work with that person. I said, why? Well, our head of credentialing, who worked at another big box company, knows the person well, and the person's just a jerk. That radiologist was just a jerk to the staff and difficult to get along with, would never return paperwork and whatnot. And so we had to tell that radiologist that client was just not going to be a fit for them. So be careful how you speak to people. It always gets around. It's not a huge industry, so just be nice to them, and they will really do wonders for you. So PACS equipment and training. We're kind of getting into the weeds a little bit. So let's assume, you've gone through, you've surveyed the companies, you kind of find a few that you like. You've gone through, looked at their contracts. You've gone through and had an attorney review it and signed a contract. Now you're doing licensing, credentialing, and so forth. And now you're kind of getting to that point where you're getting ready to work. Get to know the PACS equipment and training. There's lots of training available. Take advantage of the staff. Don't struggle with stuff on your own. Get to know them and ask for help, right? The IT staff are always going to be a great help to you. Be really nice to them, because if it's 2 a.m. and you have a problem and you reach out to somebody and you're nice to them and just treat them like human beings, I mean, they're going to respond to you and take your call and get your solution to you and get you back up and running. So very important. Keep that in mind. Get to know the software, the systems. So when it's you alone at night, knowing the software really better than trying to get somebody who may not be available right away, especially to perform simple functions. So if you have a real problem, obviously and you're just down, they're going to have to take care of that. But knowing the software is going to be beneficial. Okay, so just a short word about reports. My experience when I first started out was, I kept my reports were just long. I just wrote novels, just poundage of verbiage, and my impressions were long. I mean, just everything. It's just like, and then I was having a conversation with a referring physician one day, and he just said, we just want to know the 3 or 4 key things in the findings, and then the one thing in the impression, and that's it. That's really that's what would make us happy, right? It's just be to the point and be short. So I started doing that over the years, and now like my reports are just 3, 4, 5 sentences on the findings and 1 to 2 lines on the impressions. Keeping the findings simple has really forced me to kind of become a better radiologist, because I'm not hiding behind poundage of verbiage. That when you go back to really read through, I read through some of the other radiologist reports, and sometimes some of my older reports, I just like, well, I could have taken 1 sentence to say this one thing that I took 7 sentences to say. So short reports, I think, just are better overall. None of the ER doctors want to read novels. They just don't have time for it. They're seeing multiple patients. They got nurse practitioners and PAs, and and the PAs do not understand what you're saying. Just keep it short. You almost have to dumb it down, because there's a chance that they're going to get confused by something and not understand the nuances of what you're saying. And so the more simple that you keep it, the less calls you're going to get to ask, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? Also just to know what other radiologists like, when you go back to read novels and poundages of verbiage, you can just see that the radiologists know what they're talking about. They're just, they're using lots of big words to kind of hide behind, their ignorance. It's just sad to see it, but this happens all the time. So short reports are more appreciated. Also, a word about organ-based reports. I'm not a fan of that reporting system where you've got, liver and gallbladder and spleen and then bones and then viscera, and you got colons and all this stuff here. Whoever came up with that, like, that sounds like, it seemed like a cute idea, but as a radiologist, when you're going to report through and you're crafting this thing out, instead of just saying the findings, right? Like my reports are just, the findings. I'm trying to figure out, okay, this thing has to go here, but it doesn't go there, and then this just takes up mental bandwidth, my opinion. And there's software programs out there that kind of, put that all in there for you. But I just, find it's like, there's so many pertinent negatives in here. They got to try to decipher, where's the positive one finding in here. Everything just becomes a blur, right? I mean, there's all these negatives in here, and you're trying to find the couple, positive findings. It's just not helpful, I don't think. I just put, positive finding, positive finding, positive finding. And then I'll have, my one catch-all pertinent negative that says something like the rest of the solid organs, viscera, and bones are unremarkable. And that way I'm just, I'm focused in here. So I don't have this long, uh, tons and tons of verbiage to decipher and go back through. Uh, Clinicians, when I started out, it became apparent to me, clinicians oftentimes do not know what you're talking about in the long form reports, and especially when you're hiding behind radiology speak, and everyone knows what I'm talking about. It's just much often easier just to come out and say it. Just say it. Is there a bleed? Is there an infarct? Is it positive for appendicitis? Is there inflammation around the appendix? Is there not? Is it a stone? What's the diameter? Just say it. Just keep it simple, short and sweet. You're just going to be happier, in my opinion. So, okay. Okay, a word about ergonomics and comfort. Now, as a teleradiologist, you are going to be sitting in that chair for long periods of time. Get really comfortable in that chair. Invest in a good chair. At one point in time, I had a massage chair in the zero gravity position, and it was awesome. I have another chair that I use right now that's also zero gravity, but it's not a massage chair. But get whatever you like. I personally sit in zero gravity and have my monitors raised a bit and tilted toward me, and I'm not stressed. I mean, my weight's distributed all through my body. I'm not putting all that weight on my spine. It works for me. I'm a happy camper. I can sit there 2-3 hours at a time. It's important to take breaks, but sometimes I'll go for 2-3 hours, then go take a break. And there's radiologists and teleradiologists out there that will sit there and work 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. Don't do that to yourself. Take breaks. Get up, shake the DVTs out of your leg, and move around. You need a mental break too. So, but invest in a good chair. I don't like the traditional secretary position, where they have, where they show you the diagram of the table here, and here's the computer monitor, and you got the person sitting, feet flat like this, and their eye level, back straight, arms out here on a keyboard. This is just uncomfortable. You can't really sit. You got all this stress on your back in this uncomfortable position. You need to be, my opinion, laying down at some kind of angle, and then having your monitors kind of angled toward you. My angle is not this extreme. It's more like approximately like this, kind of a 45-degree angle with the monitors like this. They're more higher up like that. It's not this one here, but the monitors, I can see everything really clearly here. So it's whatever's comfortable for you. If you're comfortable in the secretary position, by all means do that. I just am not. I really thought I think it's just an industrial age posture that simply doesn't work in teleradiology, but more on ergonomics in another video. So let's see, we'll go right to the next one here. All right. So a little word about non-compete provisions. I think this is important, and a lot of young rads kind of just sign up and jump into something and not understand what it is. This is why it's important to get an attorney involved. But I think there's some fair aspects of non-competes and some unfair aspects. But why do big box companies have non-compete provisions? Well, obviously they want to control you, right? I mean, in an ideal world, big companies are going to totally control their labor supply where they can't go out work anywhere else. I mean, that's what they want to do. But if you're a 1099 independent contractor, you're independent. So I'll tell you what I think is fair and what's not. Now, by the way, a new variation of this is the W-2 teleradiologist. Now, if you're currently a W-2 teleradiologist, I really think you're doing yourself a disservice because you're kind of just really restricted. You're really restricted in what you're doing. But that's my opinion. I mean, some people need that, W-2 feeling of security and whatnot. But I mean, the worst is W-2s that are pay-per-click. There's no guarantee. If you're a W-2 with a salary guarantee, I mean, that's not terrible. I mean, that's fair. If you're, getting 400, to 500 W-2 with a reasonable schedule, I mean, that's not terrible. There's better ways to work, but I mean, it's not terrible. But if you're W-2 and it's pay-per-click, think about that again, because you can't write anything off. You're paying the full tax, right? Whereas a 1099 as an entrepreneur, and you have write-offs, right? You can write things off and not pay taxes on it. You can deduct stuff. So talk to your accountant about that 1099 W-2. I'm not an accountant, but just my anecdotal experience. So okay, so anyway, but back to the non-compete thing. So our view as teleradiologists, we've essentially become a commoditized specialty doing reads. So the reality is a read is a read is a read. It just is, right? So as consulting physicians, though, providing reads, there's many providers of these reads, right? There's a lot of middlemen in teleradiology. My view is that I'm going to be the Switzerland of teleradiology. I think the radiologists are really kind of, the processor of reads, and I don't really care where the reads come from. They can come from multiple different sources, and I'll have relationships with different companies and clients and whatnot. But I'm not going to restrict myself just to be restricted to one company here with a 6-month uh, termination provision and not able to work for other companies or other imaging centers and hospitals and so forth. But I think what's fair is, if you have been reading for a set of hospitals that this company has, right, that then, for a period of time, maybe 2 years or so, that you're not read. You do not read for those hospitals. I mean, that's fair because the Telerad company has invested time and all that kind of stuff into this. You exclude those, but that should not preclude your ability to read for, all these different either companies or clients or whatnot over here. So it's kind of, this is kind of more, if you're restricted, it's really kind of more of a job, which kind of goes with the W-2. But if you're 1099, you really, you should be independent, right? You determine, who you read for and how many clients and so forth. So, so my opinion, as long as non-competes are restricted to only the hospitals and imaging centers the company provides you for a period of time, I think it's like 2 years. I think that's fair. I mean, that's, it's got to work. It's got to be a win-win both ways. But here's an example of a non-compete. So what's not fair is a company that says you can't do any form of teleradiology. This used to be in a big box company. I think they got rid of it. They considered any form of teleradiology competing, which I think is totally unfair because they can't stop you from earning your own source of income, wherever it is. Maybe there's a small hospital practice, that you used to work for that wants you to do teleradiology reads. And I knew some of the companies would be like, okay, well, we'll carve out or exclude specific little hospitals you did locums at. Or I don't think that's good enough. I think it should be, the companies, the hospitals and imaging centers that the company brings to you. Fine, you won't, go directly around them to solicit them. But any other hospital, imaging center, teleradiology company, in my opinion, is fair game. So in a nutshell, that's kind of, my thought on the non-competes. Okay, so this will be the last slide here. So looking to the future, at some point you're going to want to mature out of, the big box company. But during the time you're there, enjoy your big box company culture, the workflow, the environment, the other rads. Get to know your other rads, the people who are working with you. I love meeting radiologists, teleradiologists, form lifelong collegial relationships and so forth. Soak up and learn everything you can from the big box company culture and lifestyle. And at some point you will understand that there is a better way out there, and look for a more independent route where you can work for multiple clients at the same time. So, But anyway, keep that in mind for the future. Keep learning and growing as a radiologist and teleradiologist, and invest in your education. So the last thing I'll leave you with is, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. So invest not just in your radiology education, but in your business education, your financial education, financial planning. Get savvy, start to, ask questions, talk to your colleagues. And of course, stay tuned for additional videos that we're going to have. And I created this website and series just to really educate my fellow teleradiology colleagues, radiologists. And I get inquiries from radiologists, teleradiologists from all over the world, different countries. And it's fascinating to interact with people and whatnot. So thank you very much for watching this video. Good luck, and look for additional videos and courses at teleradlaunch.com. Thank you.